and welcome back to Book and Page. We are on to the fourth video for Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And like always, we'll start with a brief summary of what happened in this section and then get on to some talking points. So, we left poor Gawain lonely and sad in the snow until a magical castle appeared. We're fine now. That's not like anything suspicious. So, the porter of this magical castle very happily decides, yes, you can be trusted, come on in, and he in fact goes to get more people to welcome Sir Gawain in. And they're also super excited to have a guest. So much so, they're helping him get his armor off, they're helping him take care of his horse, and then they lead him in and introduce him to the Lord of the Court. You know, the one you figure would have a say before you just welcome the dude inside. Well, the Lord of the Court is a big man in the prime of life, and Gawain seems to like him right away. Thank goodness, because he also likes Gawain. We're going to get along fine. So, the Lord of the Court welcomes him in, gets him into a change of clothes, gets him comfortable, gives him some food. Cool. I mean, this just magically solved all our problems. I hope you're getting red flags as much as I am. So after he's fed and watered, as is polite, they've waited until now to ask him who he actually is and what he is doing here. So he finally introduces himself. Hey, I'm Sir Gawain from the court of King Arthur. And everyone's like, oh, this is excellent, because he will be super cultured and courtly. Oddly enough, no discussion about, knightly fighting. It's all about the language of love. Which is, of course, courtly love. There's a difference. Lancelot. And so they decide this is great. But we gotta go to the chapel. The bells for Mass are ringing. So off they head with Gawain, with the Lord, and oh look, there's a lady of the castle. Ain't she beautiful? She's also escorted by a terribly ugly old woman. Again, not suspicious at all. And, you know what? Let's have some fun before we head off to bed. This happens for a second day, and then on to a third. And then Gawain's sort of like, I'm terribly sorry, I'm enjoying myself, but I gotta go. And everyone's like, no, Gawain, don't go. And he's like, I kinda gotta go meet the Green Knight at the Green Chapel. And we know, because he has to go die. Yay! No wonder Gawain's reluctant to leave. But it's fine, the Lord says. You can stay for the next 3 days. The Green Chapel's basically around the corner from my castle. I'll have someone take you over there when it's your day to die. It's fine! It's fine. And Gawain's liking this place. He's liking his private conversations with the lady. He's liking the Lord. He's liking the food, the fun. So Gawain says, heck yes, I'm gonna stay. Oh, we're gonna play a game. Cool. So the game that is proposed now is that the Lord will go hunting for the next 3 days, while Gawain stays in his court, and at the end of each day, they will exchange the prizes that they won. Not suspicious at all. And Gawain agrees. This is a great plan. And that's the end of part 2. Again, not suspicious at all. Like, in my notes, I literally have written, what could go wrong? Everything. Everything's about to go wrong. So, as you could tell from just my emotions during this summary of what happened, I'm suspicious. But truth be told, that suspicion grows in really interesting ways. Was I super suspicious reading through the first time before I got to class and my professor was like, you should be suspicious? No. Like, literally, I was like, oh, this is fun. I'm enjoying this. Gawain gets a party before he dies. Because what actually appears super suspicious is when you very closely look at the words used in the text. Or should be used in the text. Again, this is a translation, so things might be a little different between different translations. But if you actually look carefully throughout this part, from the very beginning, red flags should be going up. Now, when they actually bring Gawain in, they don't take his armor right away. They take his horse, his means of escape. They take his sword, his means of defending himself. They take his shield, which we just previously discussed in the last video, is like this really important thing to Gawain that helps bolster his confidence and his moral decisions to do the right thing by actually going to the Green Chapel, which has now been removed to him. Why did we spend all that time talking about it if we're going to take it away right away? Red flags. And, of course, taking his helm. So he no longer has the ability to hide his own identity. It's there for everyone to see. But you don't notice that. You just notice a big group of welcoming people, which is super nice considering that Gawain's been suffering this entire time. And again, considering the castle appeared because Gawain prayed, you think to yourself, this makes sense. This is an answer to Gawain's prayers. This can't be suspicious at all. So right from the first verse, we have this, very quick, just peeling away of Gawain. So much so that it doesn't even feel like it's happening. And it continues on. He does eventually lose his armor as well. But it's done in such a good-natured way that you think that it's not suspicious, right? It makes sense that he shouldn't bring arms into somebody else's castle. That's super rude. It's very polite that people are taking care of a horse, because in those days, horses were very important to knights. So yes, you want to have the horse taken care of even before you have the knight taken care of. I mean, they're doing all the polite things. They feed him, clothe him, wash him, before we get to the "so who are you again?" conversation. But if you're very careful and you look through the wording actually used, things start to become deeply uncomfortable. For two major reasons. The first being that the word seems or appeared to be show up repeatedly throughout this section. And you don't notice it because we are sort of used to this narrator that we can't fully trust. A narrator that doesn't know full things, doesn't know what everybody's thinking, or things like that. So we're relatively used to getting this information about seems or appeared to be. I know I use this as well because I've got characters when I write that can't read other people's minds. So they can only really guess at what somebody else might be thinking. But that should be a red flag to you that that person could be wrong. And this is showing up repeatedly throughout this section. The Lord of the House seems to be in the prime of life and very rugged and noble. Or so it appeared to Gawain. That's repeated. That's actually a line. He seems to be these things. Or so it appeared to Gawain. The narrator is drawing your attention to it because it's very easy to miss. So why don't we say it twice? Something's not right here. And that is not the only time that seems or appeared to be show up here. There are plenty of times that the narrator is actually giving us these terms. The lady seems to be more beautiful than Guinevere. Things should be showing up in our heads to be like, something's wrong here. But the use of the words and just how subtle they actually are does mean oftentimes we're going to miss them on the first go-around. When I first originally read this, I was not paying that close attention. So I thought, yeah, this is excellent. It took my professor going through and highlighting each of the moments that the narrator is actually undercutting his own description of how fine everything seems by using that word. This is appearances, and appearances can be deceiving. So the question is, how much of this is honest to God, just Gawain getting the right idea, but not being able to guarantee it, because he can't read people's minds, and how much of this is Gawain actually getting things wrong? And that then is repeated for the audience as well, right? Because we are following Gawain along. So how much are we getting correct? And how much are we getting incorrect? And how do we ever know? And that's the hard part. When you are reading a text, you should always be at least a little suspicious of the narration's viewpoint. And I had this recently pointed out. I'm working on my thesis, which involves Harry Potter, and I was actually reading a text by John Granger, who's a big Potter scholar, and he pointed out that J.K. Rowling is very good at using this idea of a narrator in Harry to make us think we've got things figured out. Up to the first 5 books, we follow Harry's belief, and it turns out, wouldn't you know it, he's wrong. But when we get to the 6th book, and Harry spends the entire time being suspicious of Draco Malfoy, and everyone else disagrees with him, we start to disagree with him too, because he's led us wrong in the past. And whoops, wouldn't you know it, he's right this time. So what we actually have happening, and here as well, is this idea that, okay, are we suspicious of our narrator to the point where we disbelieve everything we're being told? Do we believe our narrator? How much should we be taking seriously here, and how much should we actually be panicking? This is especially true because we know that Gawain is going to meet his death. He's got this beheading game on his mind, and suddenly we're given what seems to be too good to be true as a way out, or at least a way to really enjoy your last few days. To go along with the use of seems and appears to be, the narrator also uses another word often throughout this section, and it seems harmless at first, but if we are starting to get suspicious of what's happening here, the word he uses becomes a lot more disconcerting. And that's the sheer number of times that the narrator actually tells us people are laughing in this section. It comes up repeatedly. Gawain is laughing, the Lord is laughing, the lady's laughing, the entire court is laughing. Now, laughter can seem like a perfectly normal thing, and in fact, it can put you at ease, which seems to be what's happening to Gawain here. This is the court that he needed because he needs to enjoy life while he still has it, and laughing is part of it. But if we are starting to get suspicious of what's actually going on, laughter becomes very nefarious. There's a reason why a lot of us are freaked out by clowns. And what actually somebody's pointed out to me, and if I can find where I found this, I'd love to link it below, is that we don't trust people who show the wrong emotions. So if you're normally a not happy person, but you present yourself as a happy version of a clown, suddenly we're really disconcerted. And we want to run the other direction. So when people are constantly happy and constantly smiling, when the situation doesn't necessarily call for it, again, our confidence in this situation is undercut. How much of this laughter is forced or fake? Just like everything else we're seeing. How much of it is actually sinister? How much of this is people enjoying the fact that they're well aware that Gawain is off to his death? By pairing the repeated use of seems and appears to be with the repeated use of laughter, this entire section on a surface read is really nice. And it becomes completely unsettling once you start to pick up on those cues, especially if you think that Gawain might be wrong here. If you don't trust your narrator, suddenly all of this becomes very frightening, and it becomes a question of what you're actually supposed to do in response to this. This is made worse by one particular use of a word right at the end, when the Lord is laying out the game that he wants to play with Gawain. So he says whatever he catches hunting, he'll give to Gawain, and Gawain will give him what he receives. But the word he uses is whatever mishap comes your way. Am I going to fall down the stairs? Is somebody actively going to murder me? I suddenly don't want to be here. The use of very specific words just makes the entire situation deeply unsettling, if you notice them. But if you don't, you can go on your merry way, laughing along with everybody else, never quite being sure. Maybe they're not laughing with me. Maybe they're laughing at me. And the interesting thing is that the narrator sort of draws suspicion away from this subtle use of wordage that would make us suspicious of the entire court by providing us with two distractions. One being, of course, this really beautiful lady that Gawain sees, who's super interested to have private but innocent, we're assured, very without sin conversations with this beautiful lady, who maybe is even prettier than Guinevere. And so suddenly we have somebody else, or at least Gawain has somebody else to focus on. But at the same time, the narrator works to distract us, because what actually happens is the narrator uses the beautiful lady in pair with this ugly old woman. And we get a description, oddly enough, of both of them. And I'd say even more of the older woman than we do of the lady. So I'm going to go ahead, find it, and read a section of that out loud. And I just want to point out, again, throughout this text, I've got little red flags drawn because my professor made me suspicious of everything. Okay, so we've got a woman coming over. She was the loveliest on earth in complexion and features, in figure, in coloring, and behavior above all others, and more beautiful than Guinevere it seemed to the knight. See what I mean? Our words coming up. She came through the chancel to greet him courteously, another lady leading her by the left hand, who was older than she, an aged one, it seemed. That's twice in what? 5 lines? 3, actually. Oh, 4. Cut the difference, right? And respectfully treated by the assembled knights. But very different in looks were these two ladies, for where the young was fresh, the other was withered. Every part of the one was rosily aglow, and on the other rough wrinkled cheeks hung in folds. Many bright pearls adorned the kerchiefs of one, whose breast and white throat, uncovered and bare, shone more dazzling than the snow new fallen on the hills. And the other wore a garret over her neck, her swarthy chin wrapped in chalk-white veils, her forehead enfolded in silk, muffled up everywhere, with embroidered hems and lattice work of tiny stitching, so that nothing was exposed of her but her black brows, 2 eyes, and her nose, her naked lips, were repulsive to see, and shockingly bleared. A noble lady indeed, you might call her, by God, with body squat and thick, and buttocks bulging broad, more delectable in looks, was the lady whom she led. I'm not sure I should be suspicious here or not, but I think I'm suspicious. But that's the issue. We're suddenly suspicious of the old woman, who we're told later is also seated in the place of honor, when Gawain's eyes are focused on this beautiful young woman. Spoiler alert, we shouldn't trust either of them. But the issue is that the narrator is well aware that we're looking for, action and something that's going to move this story forward. So he gives us a really easy target to be suspicious of. The fact that this old lady's getting so much description time, something's up with her. She's gonna play a big part in this. Something is wrong. Well, then who are we not focusing on? Oh, the young lady, maybe. Well, not quite. These two ladies are presented in tandem, that we might be suspicious of the older one, and suspicious of how much Gawain's paying attention to the younger one. There's somebody we're not paying attention to here, which would be the Lord of the Court. Literally, the moment the ladies come into our attention, we're sort of suspicious of both of them, or at least interested in what they have to do with this story. So much so that, for a while at least, the Lord sort of disappears into the background. He just sort of seems to be here to have fun. And then he starts dropping information like, oh yeah, I know where the Green Chapel is. But this allows us to think, oh yeah, something's going to happen with these ladies. Gawain now has an excuse to stay at court. Something's going to be happening. And something certainly is going to be happening. Because we suddenly get this game within a game. Or a second game. It's this weird thing where you can't quite tell if we're within the first game with a second game, or if we're seeing a mirroring of the game motif. We're sort of at the same period historically in time, right? 1 year later, we've had this first game, so we've had this second game. And on the surface again, the second game doesn't look like it will have as severe consequences. The first game has made us deeply suspicious because something's not quite right here. So, maybe something's not quite right with the second game. But it doesn't involve anyone getting hit with an axe, at least. So what's happening here is this really weird tension building where we've suddenly got 500 strings to try and follow, and we're all wrapped up and not quite sure where to look. It's not until we really get a sense that all of this is suspicious that we start realizing maybe it's not single people or single events we need to take a look at and say, I'm not sure I trust it. Maybe it's this overall circumstance that we've actually found ourselves in. But all of this is being undercut. The narrator's very careful to make sure that your immediate idea is not to throw all of this out the window, because none of it can be true. We've spoken about Gawain's morals. He's here for a reason because he's morally bound to complete this, and we want him to be able to do that. He's in this particular castle because he prayed to God to deliver him, and God seems to have. We want to think that this is okay. But so much is starting to make us suspicious that we really can't say one way or the other if we are alright or if Gawain is alright. And how much we can actually trust what he is telling to us. How many lies are we being told? And who else is lying? So, the next part we're going to split into 3 because we've got this game set up and 3 days to go hunting and do this game exchange. So, each part will cover the particular day that the Lord and Gawain are fighting their own battles through. That's weird wording. Battles aren't important. What are you talking about? This is one of those stories that takes place completely at court. So, put down your sword. We're not going to need it. Except we might. I'm suspicious. I'm going to keep reading, and I hope you do too. See you next time.